Speaking of firestorm, Biden facing a firestorm right now because of the transcript of a call with the exiled president, former president of Afghanistan. Honestly, she should be taking some fucking horse paste. Put your horse paste where your mouth is, ma'am. I don't know if she specifically touted that treatment, though. That's wrong of me to assume. The last call between U.S. President Joe Biden and his Afghanistan counterpart before the Taliban seized control of the country, the leaders discussed military aid, political strategy, and messaging tactics. But neither Biden nor Ashraf Ghani appeared aware of or prepared for the immediate danger of the entire country falling to insurgents, a transcript reviewed by Reuters shows. Now, this is quite obvious. It seems that the military leaders and the intelligence community thought it was going to take a month or two at least for the Taliban to take over the entire country. The men spoke for roughly 14 minutes on July 23rd. On August 15th, Ghani fled the presidential palace and the Taliban entered Kabul. Since then, tens of thousands of desperate Afghans have fled, and 13 U.S. troops and scores of Afghan civilians were killed. Many of the Afghan civilians were killed by our troops in a suicide bombing at the Kabul airport during the frenetic U.S. military evacuation. Reuters reviewed a transcript of the presidential phone call and has listened to the audio to authenticate the conversation. The materials were provided on condition of anonymity by a source who was not authorized to distribute it. In the call, Biden offered aid if Ghani could publicly project he had a plan to control the spiraling situation in Afghanistan. Now, this is the thing that the right-wingers are claiming, that it's comparative to, Trump trying to extort the president of the Ukraine. Let's see what we think about it. This is my first time reading this. We will continue to provide close air support if we know what the plan is, Biden said. Days before the call, the U.S. carried out airstrikes to support Afghan security forces, a move the Taliban said was in violation of the Doha peace agreement. The U.S. president also advised Ghani to get buy-in from powerful Afghans for a military strategy going forward, and then to put a warrior in charge of the effort. Reference to Defense Minister General Bismillah Khan Mohammadi. Biden lauded the Afghan armed forces, which were trained and funded by the U.S. government. You clearly have the best military. Now he is sounding like Trump. This is sounding like a Trump call. You have the best military. You have 300,000 well-armed forces versus 70 to 80,000, and they're clearly capable of fighting well. Days later, the Afghan military started folding across the provincial capitals in the country with little fight against the Taliban. They didn't have any incentive to fight. Much of the call, Biden focused on what he called the Afghan government's perception problem. I need not tell you the perception around the world and in parts of Afghanistan, I believe, is that things are not going well in terms of the fight against the Taliban, Biden said. And there is a need, whether it is true or not, there's a need to project a different picture. Biden told Ghani that if Afghanistan's prominent political figures were to give a press conference together backing a new military strategy, that will change perception, and that will change an awful lot, I think. So he's wanting you to put a good face going forward so that the army has something to believe in and just doesn't fold automatically because they don't think there's a plan going forward. Sounds perfectly reasonable to me. There's no quid pro quo or extortion going on here. The American leader's words indicated he didn't anticipate the massive insurrection and collapse to come 23 days later. We are going to continue to fight hard, diplomatically, politically, economically, to make sure your government not only survives, but is sustained and grows. Well, it seems like the Afghan government did not, like, Ghani just wanted to fucking get the money and run. The general that we played the video of inside of his fucking house, he was on the take. He just wanted to get the money and run. Like, it was always about extortion. I mean, I'm sorry, like money laundering. Got extortion on the brain now, comparing it to the Trump call. After the call, the White House released a statement that focused on Biden's commitment to supporting Afghan security forces and the administration seeking funds for Afghanistan from Congress. Ghani told Biden he believed there could be peace if he could rebalance the military solution, but he added, "We need to move with speed. We are facing a full-scale invasion composed of Taliban, full Pakistani planning and logistical support, and at least 10 to 15,000 international terrorists, predominantly Pakistanis, thrown into this," Ghani said. Afghan government officials and U.S. experts have consistently pointed to Pakistani support for the Taliban as key to the group's resurgence. The Pakistani embassy in Washington denies those allegations. Clearly, the myth of Taliban fighters crossing from Pakistan is unfortunately an excuse and an afterthought peddled by Mr. Ashraf Ghani to justify his failure to lead and govern. There's some truth to that. The whole situation is a mess. By God, the war hawks here in this country are trying to use it to up military spending. There is a bill in committee right now, approved by the committee, going forward to increase military spending by $25 billion.
Is recognized.
This is Representative Ghani.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your leadership. I rise in strong opposition to this amendment. My question is simple. If we are getting out of Afghanistan and we have money, why are we spending this $23.9 billion on increasing defense as opposed to, for example, giving the money to all our veterans who served in Afghanistan for 20 years? Why wouldn't that be a better use of the money? Or my Republican colleagues who have spoken eloquently about our obligation to our Afghan allies.
I mean, I think Ghani knows the answer to that is there's no money in giving it to our veterans. Or revamping the VA, or whatever program you want to spend it on. There is money giving it to defense contractors.
And to Afghan refugees. Why not spend the money on resettling them or helping with their evacuation? I don't understand why we need, at a time where we're withdrawing from Afghanistan, when we have been withdrawing from Iraq, a budget that is higher than at the height of the Cold War, than it is higher than 3 of President Trump's budgets.
Yeah, it would be something if we actually spent our defense budget on defense and not aggressive behavior.
Here is the question people are asking. The Democrats right now have the presidency. We have the Senate. We have the House of Representatives. And you're telling me our party, when we have both chambers and the president, are going to succumb to a Republican addition to the defense budget? If we don't stand up now to make sure that we are not
honestly
the defense budget beyond what Trump wants, what good is it to control both chambers and the presidency? Let's be very clear.
Exactly. And this is the reason why the Democrats hemorrhage votes.
In addition, beyond what the Pentagon wants. This is an
people's like, what's the point? It's just the same shit.
Voter wants across this country. I wanted more cuts than the president's budget, but I support the president's budget. I would vote for the president's budget through this committee. I have voted for every...
The Republicans are honest when they're fucking us.
Every time.
I would say the Democrats are courteous enough to give us a reach around while they're fucking us.
And Trump's budget through this committee.
But they are gaslighting us while they fuck us.
This time to advance this budget, if we are going to disregard the president, if we're going to disregard the Pentagon, if we're going to disregard the facts on the ground, and if we're going to not show any spine as a Democratic Party and say that we actually have the presidency, we have the Senate, we have the House of Representatives, we ought to have our values. And if we're not going to prioritize what needs to be prioritized in this country, which is taking on the pandemic, which is supporting our veterans, who served in Afghanistan, supporting resettlement of those who are our allies. So I oppose this amendment, and if this amendment...
Thank you, Rokon, taking care of the pandemic. It seems like the government has just ignored the fact that there is a pandemic going on. We're going to talk about that here in a second. I'm glad he brought up the pandemic and used it to contrast the $25 billion addition. For $25 billion, we could vaccinate the world. The United States can help the world produce billions of vaccine doses for just over $3 per dose. A $25 billion investment in vaccine production by the U.S. government would produce enough vaccine for low and middle income countries in 1 year. Hey, Frame, I'm doing great. A little pissed off over this shit, though. Republicans are wanting to add $25 billion to our defense spending. Defense spending! The military budget. When for $25 billion we could vaccinate the entire fucking world.